far as questions,
Okay.
as far as questions, if you want to put a question in the chat, that's fine. I may answer it during the presentation if it's, you know, just appropriate to the slide, or I'll answer it at the end if it's something more specific. Okay, thank you, Stacy, for a wonderful introduction, and thank you all for taking time out of your Sunday afternoon to join us today. And got to get my presentation over here. This little title came to me about 4 o'clock in the morning on the way back from a workshop that Mama had done in Jackson, Mississippi. And we had gone to several courthouses on our way home from there to Athens, Georgia. And I thought, what do you need to do a courthouse raid? And just as a caveat, this concentrates on records as they are preserved in Georgia. As you probably are very well aware, other states use different names, put them in different places, have different offices handling different types of records. You'll have to look it up specifically for the county and state where you're working. But Google and FamilySearch.org both are excellent resources to help find you what you need. And also to find the phone number. That was the second thought that I had about the title. We always had a roll of quarters in Mama's car to feed the parking meter, and we had to go out about every 4 hours and make sure we didn't get a ticket. So things have changed a lot, haven't they? Georgia has 159 counties in it. And it seemed like during the late 1800s and early 1900s, somebody'd get mad at their neighbor and they'd go to the legislature and say, I want my property chopped off into a new county, and the legislature would do it. So if you're researching Georgia records and want to find somebody who lived in Jasper, Georgia, it's not logical, but Jasper's not in Jasper County. Monticello is the county seat of Jasper County, and Jasper is in Pickens County. So you have to, that's a big (1875), the folks that were on the southeast side of the Oconee River decided they didn't want to travel to Athens when they moved the county seat up to Athens, which was the university town. So they petitioned the legislature and made Oconee County. So Clark County lost half of its land mass. That's what it looked like in 1839. So if you're up in the Athens area looking for records, don't forget that Oconee County used to be Clark. There is an excellent list at the Georgia Archives. It's online on their website for the creation of the Georgia counties, and it tells you when the county was created and what counties existed prior to the time that that county was created. So if you're researching Georgia records, that's an excellent resource to find out, because at the time period when the county's boundaries changed, you may find records in the old county that it was cut out of, plus in the new county. Sometimes they copied the records from the old county into the new county. Sometimes they didn't, just depends on who was so diligent. Somebody says I'm cutting out, am I? Is my mic cutting out?
I think so from time to time. You're not like turning away from the microphone?
No, it's on my head.
Oh, try just on both ends, make sure that the connection is secure.
Well, it's just got one connection and it's plugged in.
Okay.
It's my internet. Even with the new Ethernet cable, it's not working right. But can everybody hear me okay? I hope.
Can hear you now. Every so often the sound just cuts out. So do you want me to tell you when that happens so you can repeat what you said?
I can just
Okay.
raise your hand or something like that.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, we'll do.
So
But I hear you now. We hear you now.
particular time that your ancestors lived in that county is critical for your success and not wasting your time searching for somebody who was buried in West Virginia, but didn't know that West Virginia was part of Virginia until the Civil War. I saw that on a Virginia genealogy Facebook page last night, which just brought it to my mind. So know where your family is, at what time, and what the counties were, and search both the old county and the new county records. As you can see, Georgia's counties changed very drastically between the time that Georgia was founded or the state of Georgia was founded in 1777 and 2022. So that's why you have to watch the historical maps for your people. Creeks out from the western part of Georgia, right in this area, and
Eve,
forcing them.
Eve, that had cut out right there, so you might want to start over with that slide.
In the 1820s, Elijah Clark and all the guys that survived the Revolution were militating to get the Creek Indians out of the land that's in the southwest part of Georgia, Columbus area and all that. So they went to the federal government and they fought wars with the Creeks and finally had them moved out to Mississippi and then later to Oklahoma. And this land was given away in land lotteries. So that's something that you'll need to know at the archives when you go there looking for records. Another thing to know about is burned counties. And Sherman didn't burn all the courthouses that are missing in Georgia. Lightning did a lot of them, just negligence. You've got a wooden courthouse and a lot of paper in it. It's going to go up like tinder when somebody drops a cigar butt in the trash can. So if you've got a burned county, there are ways around finding those records. It's possible that some of the records were taken west when the families went west. One of my Bondurant ancestors, they found the will of one of the sons of Jean-Pierre Bondurant, who was the immigrant ancestor in 1700, came to Virginia, recorded in Kentucky because one of his great-granddaughters had inherited a slave, and she took a copy of the will, certified copy of the will, with her west to Kentucky, and it was recorded in Kentucky to prove that she had the right to own that slave. And
Eve, I think you just cut out right after it being proved.
took the will to Virginia, and it was recorded in Kentucky so that she had clear title to this slave that she had inherited from her grandfather's will. And that's the only way we have a copy of that will, because the records from the county where she came, Buckingham County, were burnt. So serendipity. Family Search has a real good resource, that bottom link, for burned counties, research strategies. I'll let you read that on your own time. I went over it the other day, and it's really got a lot of ideas to use. So you're ready to go do a research trip to a courthouse. What do you know about your family? It's only open with the research room only open 2 hours a day, and you forgot the family tree or the piece of the family information that you're working on. That makes it a wasted trip. It's good to have a notebook for each of your families, either a 3-ring notebook that you can put notebook paper, add it and take it away and things like that. And also make some charts that you can put in your pocket if you don't want to have to carry your notebook, or if they don't allow your notebook to be taken into the research room. And once you get to the courthouse, use your phone to take pictures, if they allow it, of the records that you find, or get photocopies to examine later. Nothing worse than getting back home and saying, I wish I'd got a copy of that, when you realized you had seen one document in the courthouse that connected a problem, was the answer to one of your problems. And write down all of the sources, because 10 years from now, no matter how good our memory is, if you didn't write it down, you won't remember. Family connections are also very important. You've heard the fan club, friends, acquaintances, and neighbors. Sometimes it helps to work them as well as your own family, because after all, if you didn't travel more than 10 miles from the place you grew up, who are you going to marry? Especially the girls. Somebody you met in church, somebody you knew from town, somebody whose daddy did business with your daddy, and you met the son and liked him, and the rest is history. So keep the fan club in mind. Doing your homework before you go. Nowadays, so much stuff is available.
Eve, you cut out again right after "so much stuff" is probably
Right.
fine.
Yeah. Am I back? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
Okay.
you. Sorry,
Okay.
I was muted.
Sorry. That's all right. So much stuff is available now that was not even available in 2002, which is 20 years ago. It boggles my mind to think that 2002 was 20 years ago. Gosh. And how much things have changed. You've got a lot of digitized newspapers for Georgia through the Digital Library of Georgia. Family Search, Ancestry, and MyHeritage, and all those pay websites have lots of records that they are digitizing every day, adding to their collections. So you can spend money on pay websites and get a year's worth of information and research time for less than the price.
It cut out again right after research time for less than the price of.
It's for the price of a motel. Ancestry is about the price of a good motel room for a year of American access to American records. So $150, you've got a year's worth of research time. Everybody thinks it's so expensive, but when you put it up against a motel room, it doesn't sound very expensive anymore. So plan ahead. Take your notes. Call the courthouse where you want to go visit. Call the library because they may.
It cut out again right after call the library.
Call the local librarian. And you may have, they may know somebody who's a descendant of that family who might have information that you never would have known about, thanks to the librarian. Find out which courthouse office has their records in their office, or if they're all in a research room and you have to book time to use the research room. A lot of courthouses are doing that so that they have one single room that is climate controlled and manned only on demand when somebody's there that needs the records. So you can't waltz into the courthouse anymore and just go digging like we used to. I've seen Mama do it many times. For more homework, invest in a digital camera and as many SD cards as you can afford. Either that or be prepared to pay for photocopies. Some places charge $1 or $2 per page to do a photocopy for you. Your cell phone, you can take lots of pictures if you've got some way to download it and unload your. But getting a good copy, either digital or paper, of those records makes it in your hands whenever you work on it in the future. If you want people to get in touch with you, Mom used to suggest making postcards with the families you're researching in that county and ask the librarian or the county records people to pass them on when other people who are working on those families get, and to, let them have a postcard and they'll mail it to you and the two of you get in touch that way. Okay. The records in your courthouse are not there for us, the genealogists. They are there to keep track of things of value, land, property, families, like marriages and deaths.
I think it cut out again after like marriages and deaths.
Follow the money. It's giving me that internet unstable thing again. Marriages and deaths are recorded in the courthouse. Your tax records, your wills and estate papers are in the courthouse. You've got a lot of lawsuits, paperwork that's in the courthouse. So there's a lot of material there. You've just got to know how it can be used in your research. But by following the money, it knows where to look.
Eve, I'm not sure if you cut out this new slide that came up. I'm not hearing any voice with it.
Can you hear me now? Just
Yes.
nod. Okay.
Yes,
Just
yes.
just nod. That's fine. If you'll nod when I'm talking and shake your head when I'm not talking, you can't hear me. That helps a lot. In Georgia, you've got the probate office, which used to be called the ordinary. I never could understand why they called it that until Mom explained it was the court sitting for ordinary purposes, which was wills and marriages and stuff like that. The inferior court took care of the land records, the plats, the taxes. The superior court is your criminal cases, naturalizations and such like that. Those are your three main offices in Georgia. There may be called something else in other states. So do your research. In the ordinary's office or the probate court, you're going to find your marriage licenses, wills, loose estate papers, as well as the bound records, that rack of books that you saw at the beginning of the slideshow. Guardianships, pistol toters licenses, merchant license books, and even poor school rolls and the livestock mark registration book, or some of the other early books that you might find in the probate office. So tackling probate records, most people who, when they're starting out, they look for a will, and if they don't find a will, they don't know what else to do. It went backwards. So in your handout is this diagram. This is basically the steps that when someone dies, the property
Cut out again after when someone dies.
This is basically a diagram of the steps that is taken by the court to document everything, that everything is done properly by the law, and that the people who are supposed to get whatever the deceased left them get it. There are two different sides of this thing. Once, when someone dies, if they have a will, have left a will, the next of kin, sometimes the wife, sometimes a child or a friend, takes the will to the court a month or so, within a month, usually it's about a month after the death, to the probate court and tells them such and such person has died. Here is his will, and they turn it in. It is recorded in the will book, and the court starts down these steps. If the person dies with no will, there is a different procedure that's taken, but they both match. The step by step by step matches, except that you don't have the will at the beginning step. You still have the same records kept after the will is recorded as you do on the intestate estate without the will that are in the probate office. So the next of kin comes into the probate office. The judge of the probate office assigns somebody to be either executor, which usually means a will is available, or an administrator. That's someone who the court appoints estate. Then, if that person agrees to do that job, they have to get people to post bond to say that they will do a good job and they won't screw it up. Because if somebody has a $150,000 estate and they don't take care of it and distribute it properly, the bondsman will be liable for the bond that they posted, and it has to be paid into the county coffers. No money really changes hands at the point that the surety, as it's called, the people who are posting bond, and by looking at those people who are posting bond, you will find that they are either business associates or family members. You just have to do your research. Anyway, then the estate is advertised in the newspaper. Got an ad will run for 4 consecutive issues in the local newspaper. Now, if you're in a small rural area like I am in Madison County above Athens, in the Madison County estates in the early 1800s were published in the Athens newspaper because Madison County didn't have a county organ or a local newspaper. That you go to your Digital Library of Georgia Newspapers Project, and you can find out what newspapers are available for the counties that you're interested in. After the advertisement has been taken place, the court will appoint 3 reputable men. Back in the 1800s, the ladies didn't get to do all this stuff. It was always men to take an inventory of whatever is in the estate: land, slaves, livestock, crops in the field, cash on hand, notes that are due, notes that are payable, and all of that. And that is written down in the inventory book in the probate court. Once the inventory is approved, they come back into the probate court. The administrator has to post bond for the value of the estate. So does the executor. And Cheryl, if you research, Cheryl asked, were they family members or friends or unrelated? It depends. That's research you've got to find out. Look in censuses and stuff like that to see if they may be neighbors, or as you research your family further back, you may find out that they are in-laws, sisters, your sister's cousin's first cousin or something like that. They may be related somehow. That's why they're willing to do the work. Once the court has approved for the admission, has issued the letters of administration or letters
cut out right after issued the letters of administration.
All right, the letters of administration, can you hear me now? The letters of administrations for intestate wills I'm going to have to get a better internet. The letters of execution are for testate wills. And this is the starting point where money starts to be moved around to the heirs and the widow and the children and things like that. Both the administrator and the executor have to keep good records. They have to keep receipts for everything that they pay out and turn those receipts into the court on an annual basis, usually a year after the start date for when the administration was started. So you can look in the administration books
Cut out right after look in the administration books.
for you look in the administration books for the reports of the administrator, and the executor's returns books are from the testate will or the testate estate reports. All of those little chits of paper were saved in what was called a bundle, and a piece of thread and later a rubber band. They were wrapped up in a piece of paper that had all of the receipts listed on it that the administrator turned in, and they just made just a little bundle. And they were metal file drawers that you would see on the top shelf of an old courthouse office, and they're stuffed full of paper. If a mouse got in there, they would be so happy. But those little receipts had a lot more information than just the name of the person and the amount of money. Frequently, it could tell you where they lived, the circumstances, how it was paid. For instance, if they got a calf instead of a cow or something like that, that could be explained in the receipt. All of these reports were kept annually until the youngest child of the deceased either married or came of age, 21. Marriage usually was for the daughters and the males when they became 21. At that time, you have the final distribution to the heirs that are still living. If a child of the deceased has already died, if, say, one of his daughters had married and had 3 children, those children would inherit her share. And might inherit part of her share. It would be divided up according to the rank of kinship. The final distribution to the heirs can be critical in proving connections between the deceased and later generations of your family. So that little piece of paper is in your handout. So you might want to add that to your notebook just to keep track of where everything is. I've basically hurried all through this, so I'm going to go on through this at a slower pace now. Of course, I've just said all of this. The next of kin or an interested party. If somebody died and didn't have any family, but he had holdings like land or slaves or livestock, the court would appoint someone who either may have been a business associate or a friend to take the place of the next of kin and handle the estate. And this person who would be, further out kinship. Instead of children, it might be brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews, and further out. This is a will that was written in 1839 in Madison County, which is where I live, just above Athens. He mentions all of his heirs, the husbands of his wives, of his daughters. I mean, he was the husband of his wives, of course, and the names of the heirs of his deceased children. This is a gold mine will. He did it up right. And he appointed his sons, Barry M. David, and a friend, Alexander Vaughn, to be his executor.
Eve, you might have cut out after Alexander Vaughn as executor.
Look at the bottom of the will, and you see people who were present when the will was signed. They are the testators. The court will call them in to swear that they saw this piece of paper signed by the deceased on such and such a date, and the signature looks like it's supposed to. They're basically swearing that this is the proper will of Isaac David. The time limit to prove the will is usually about 6 months. But if you look in the records, you'll find people typically going in within 30 days of the death of the person who owned this property. Unfortunately, the signatures you see in the will book, the recorded will book, are not originals. They're just they're just written there by the clerk of court. You can, however, sometimes find the original will. And if you do that, that's a gold mine.
I think you cut out after that's a gold mine.
This is the page in Will Book A in Madison County, showing that at the May 1840 term of the Court of Ordinary, which is the probate court, Martin Tiller, Barry Hartsfield, and William Glenn, who saw him sign it, came into court and swore under oath that they believed this to be the same will upon which they saw Isaac David make his mark. And let's go back to the previous page. See, it's his mark. Why is that? When you see somebody making his mark, they were typically illiterate, did not know how to read and write. So the will was recorded in the book on May the 11th, 1840 by Richard Golston, who was the clerk of ordinary, CCO is clerk court ordinary. You will see the terms executor or executrix. Executrix is possibly the widow. It's usually meaning a female. Administratrix is also female. If you see administrator with will annexed listing in the book, this is a red flag that there was a problem with the will that was brought to court. Somebody contested it or felt like it had been made under duress or something like that, and the court agreed, and it was turned into it to act like an intestate estate, but Does that make sense?
You cut out right before that.
When you have the term administrator with will annexed, there was a will. Somebody came into court when it was presented to the ordinary for proving and protested, saying, I don't believe that's right. Or somebody had forced them to write it that way. So the judge has the power to throw the will out or to allow the will to be followed, limited up to certain limits, and it becomes an administration instead of having an executor as the will had been set out. That's just one of those clues that you watch out for to know that there was a problem with it, and you want to go to look at the court record books. Here's where this is an actual record from a record book in the Jackson County Ordinary's minutes for the having given the notice that he should apply for letters of administration on the estate of Walter Bell, late of this county, deceased, and no objection being made, it is ordered that letters of administration be granted to him. Go back to the previous screen, Debbie.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Oh, the screen with before this one. Okay, I didn't.
This one.
I missed that one. Did too many. The temporary administrator gets it started. That person has to post bond. And then once it's published in the newspaper or in public places, then the temporary administrator are given full letters of administration. Temporary administrators until the notification has been published in the newspapers. And notification has been sent out to everybody who owes money to the estate or heirs who live away from the city where the deceased died. Then once that's taken care of, the full permanent letters of administrations or executorship is issued. Thank you, Debbie. So I haven't practiced what I preached. Joseph Singleton was called by the clerk of court to come and administrator Walter Bell's estate. And I'm bad. That's one of my things to do this fall, to figure out how Dr. Joseph Singleton is connected to Walter Bell and the reason why he was given the administration of the estate. I may never figure it out. Okay, the permanent letters of administration. Bond has been posted by the surety to cover the value of the estate. This is recorded in the administrator's bond books or the executor's bond books. And if the administrators who have started the task aren't up to it, the court reserves the right to find somebody else to do the work. If one of the heirs comes into court and say, I don't like how Uncle Joe is handling this, he's been keeping all the livestock for himself and not distributing him to the heirs, the judge will call Uncle Joe into the court and say, what are you doing and why? And the judge has the right to take the administration.
I think it cut out right after judge has the right to take the administration.
From the person who has been working on it so far, and he can give it to somebody else who also has to go through the bond process just like the other person had to. And that person will have to do the same reports that the first person would have had to do. If you see a change in administration or executorship, see if you can find out why. It should be in the record books. Taking inventory was done by 3 people of high standing in the community, trusted. They would go to the farm or the house.
I think you cut out right after go to the farm or house.
And take down a list of everything that the deceased owned at the time of his death or her death. This is an appraisal account from 1817 in Lincoln County, Georgia, which is over near Augusta. And the 3 people who were appointed by the ordinary to go and examine the estate were Mark Anthony, Edmund Lyon, and John Sharp. If you look up here at the top right-hand corner of this page, right up here, it started on 410, but they ran out of space and they had to skip over to 461, 462, 463, 464, 465. John Moss had a huge estate. And they would place a fair market value for each of these items. A bay mare, heifers, young cattle, and frequently you will say it will have in here the names of slaves. Down here, Negro fellow Jim, $800. Negro fellow Henry, $800. Woman Rachel and her child Jim, $800. I didn't copy all of the pages for this, but you would need to look at all of the pages. Because that is the estate that will be divided among the heirs of John Moss. Estate inventories are usually put in a separate book from the administration bonds and things like that. So you're going to have to examine more than one book to find all the pieces of paper pertaining to an estate. land, livestock, crops in the field, household furniture, watches, books, even usually if they have a family Bible, it's frequently listed in the inventory. And that should send you chasing to see if you can figure out who got it. Notes of hand means if the deceased loaned somebody money and the person signed a piece of paper saying, I'll pay you back on such and such a date, that debt is due to the estate as soon as the executor can collect it. A very detailed record of how much John Moss owned in 1817. Once inventory, the administrator or executor can petition the court to have an estate sale to pay for the outstanding debts, like for the coffin and the doctor's fees and the burying, the digging of the grave and all that sort of stuff. Support for his widow and children for a year, and the expenses that he as administrator or executor can collect from the estate as part of his functioning as the executor. They weren't typically paid money to do this. They just got their expenses back. When you see an estate sale recorded in the inventory book, read who got what. If there's a family Bible in there, be sure to note who bought that Bible and go tracking that person down and see if your family Bible may still be in existence in the hands of one of that person's descendants. A lot of times you will find friends and neighbors coming in and buying things at a nominal price and then giving them back to the widow so that she has a bed and bedding and blankets and cooking utensils and things like that with which to support her children. Can you imagine being a widow, lost your husband, 3 kids, wanting to be, and they sold your cook pot and your bedstead and your bedding in the estate sale? I've seen it happen. The legal notices are in newspaper. Usually some newspapers, they were on the first page of the newspaper. Most of them, they were on the last page. Most newspapers in the early 1800s had only 4 sheets. It was 2 big sheets of paper folded in half. So there were 4 pages. So pages 3 and 4 typically were the advertisements of all the comings and goings, the ships lists, the display ads from local businesses, and the legal notices. Because the Digital Library of Georgia has committed to digitizing newspapers for every A lot of those newspapers are now online. The newspapers are online and they're free to search. It's in the Georgia Newspapers Project. No, Georgia Historical Newspapers is what it's called, in the Digital Library of Georgia. And you can actually save the pages to your computer as a PDF file. And it's a good file. Thanks, Stacy. Stacy's posted the link to it. It's a saving the PDF. You can even
I think you cut out after you can even.
You can even zoom in and read the text because the PDF is so clear. They've done a great job of digitizing these records. I don't know if you can read the example that I've posted here, but this is 1836 Athens. And there's an administrator sale for Madison County, one for Franklin County, which is about 40 miles north of Athens, up on I-85. Habersham County, which is even further north. That's right on the edge of the mountains. Those three things that say guardian sale, administrator sale in the second column, that's where those are from. But they were published in Athens, 40 miles away. Okay, you said they missed digitizing a whole book of newspapers in the Macintosh. I'll send you an email who you need to contact if they haven't got them yet.
I did, and they didn't seem very interested, but maybe they've done it later.
Well, it's good to keep checking back. I'll send you the guy who I know at the university.
I think you cut out there right after the guy you know at the university.
So you can rattle his cage. As you can see from this 1827 Athens newspaper, there's a sale on the Courthouse Square in Gwinnett County, which is Lawrenceville over in Atlanta now. Hall County, which is Gainesville, that's 40 miles northwest of Athens. Another one for Gwinnett. And one for Warren County, which is almost to Augusta. And this one right here, it says Christian Durden applied for letters of administration with the will annexed for the estate of John Durden, deceased. Right there. But these newspapers on the Digital Library of Georgia are searchable. And you can find your family names in there. In an estate, if there are children under the age of 21, the court usually appointed a guardian to handle their inheritance until they reach age. Sometimes the mother is automatically made the guardian, so she gets the whole estate for the support of herself and the children. Sometimes it's a male family member or friend. If the widow or the wife is not willing to undertake the guardianship, or if the court feels like they need somebody else to manage the money, that person has to post bond just the same as the administrators and executors do. but the book that it's in is the guardianship bond book. That's another book on the shelf. And annual returns will be made by that guardian until that heir either marries, usually the daughters, or turns 21. And sometimes if you look at the ages of the children, you can figure out if they're the deceased had more than one wife. If they've got children, older children who may have inherited something from the father when they married, but the younger children are listed in the will and the older children are not, it's possible that the older children got their inheritance when they married, and he's saving all the rest of his estate for his second wife's children. And that's where you go to the deed records. We'll talk about that in a minute. This came from the court minutes of Jackson County, which is Jefferson, about 20 miles north of Athens. John Anderson Ivy, Elisha Ivy, Delilah Ivy, orphan children of Bennett Ivy, deceased, came into court and made choice of Joseph Hampton for their guardian. It is their further order that said Joseph Hampton be appointed guardian of Mary Ann Ivy. The Joseph Hamptons be appointed guardian of Mary Ann Ivy and Martha Ivy, orphans of said Bennett Ivy, deceased. Why are the two little girls separate from the three other ones? Orphans over the age of 14 in Georgia were allowed to choose their guardians. If they were under 14, the guardian was chosen by the court for them. And since their older brothers and sister felt like Joseph Hampton would be a good guardian for them, the court felt like, well, he can handle two more kids. That's what, it's no biggie kind of thing. But at least it kept the family together. And Ivy. And I just started doing my homework on him this morning, getting ready for this, practicing what I preach again. And he was a Revolutionary soldier who came to Wilkes County, Georgia, and then wound up in Jackson County, Georgia, where he got land. He died about 1820. And these are his orphans by his second wife. I did find that out this morning. I haven't found everything out about it, but that's another project for this fall. So I know why this happened. So when you find records, look at them and figure out what they're telling you. Be Sherlock and say, why were those two girls listed separately from the other three? Who was Joseph Hampton, and what connection did he have to Bennett Ivy? I don't know yet. Annual returns for all of these appointments were made to the court. So the ordinary was quite busy keeping up with recording returns from the executors, from the administrators, from the guardians, everything. And those are all in bound books. They had to take all the little receipts and make a list of the receipts, who it was paid to and how much, and the date for every estate that went through their hands. This continues on each estate until the youngest child marries or becomes 21. And at that point, you have the final settlement. And when that happens, the administrator is issued letters of dismission, so is the executor. And the bondsmen no longer have the debt that they swore that they would carry as surety or bondsman for his administration or executorship. The lien has basically is dismissed from the bondsman. In the
Cut out right after dismissed from the bondsman.
Okay. The lien on the bondsman is released when the estate is settled. The reason for looking at all of the annual returns is you will find the charges by the doctor for the illnesses of the family as well as of the deceased, burial expenses, widow's year support. This is the support money that the executor or administrator gives the widow to pay for food and clothes and housing for herself and the children. Schooling of the children. If you find an estate where the daughter is sent like to Lucy Cobb Institute in Athens, which was quite expensive after 1859 when it was founded by Thomas Reed Roots Cobb, the Civil War general, and his wife. I found one annual return that listed all of the ribbons, the cloth, the shoes, everything that they bought for the daughter for her to take to school at Lucy Cobb. And that was quite a fascinating list to see. The annual return also lists the money that comes in from the sales of the assets from the estate. Otherwise, how is the executor going to pay that money out? He's got to get it somewhere. If the deceased estate, the widow could petition after his death to receive the entire amount of his estate. And this was only recorded in the widow's years report book. You won't find an administration or an executor or anything else, any other record in that office except in the widow's years support book. And once she spent it, I guess she had to figure out something else. So if you don't find records for a deceased, someone who died, go look in the widow's years support book and see if there is a record there and determine whether he was so poor that there wasn't enough there that somebody needed to be appointed to handle the sale of it or the management of it. And they gave it all to the widow to support herself and her children. And I imagine in that case, she probably married again within a year or so of being widowed to have another breadwinner to support herself and her children. And for that, advertisement. Sale of a land lottery lot in Stewart County won by a Revolutionary soldier is being sold by the executor. Thomas Lambert, Revolutionary soldier, late of Clark County, deceased. He won a lot that's in Stewart County, which is down below Columbus or near Columbus. It's on the Chattahoochee anyway. This estate sale is a guardian sale in Habersham County of land that is in Walker County, which is northwest Georgia, and it's advertised in Athens. That's a 5-hour drive in a car today over highways. This administrator is selling slaves that belong to the estate of, see if I can read it. Here, John Hutchison, executor of has fully administered the estate and prays to be dismissed in Franklin County. This is Gainesville, Hall County, which is 40 miles away from us, from Athens anyway. So this is a list of, this is a record of yearly expenditures that was from my great-great-grandfather's estate. Mama had this in her files. 64 by his son, Rufus Lafayette Moss, who was my great-great-grandfather. And I wanted you to notice the price of bacon. 38 pounds of bacon costs $133 in Confederate money. All of these figures were Confederate money, not greenbacks. But as you can see, there's a very detailed list of every expense that was paid out by the executor of the estate. And that can be a gold mine for your family's information. Those packets I was telling you about, that's what they look like. Each one of these little things has one sheet of paper wrapped around the outside of it, tied with a piece of string, and stuffed. They were stuffed into metal file cabinets originally, and then the Clark County probate office moved them down to the records room, and they were all stuffed in paper boxes, just like this. And don't you know, a mouse would have been happy to get into there. Receipts, the little chit of paper. It may be no wider than your thumb, or a piece of paper torn off another piece of paper the size of your thumb, where somebody signed, I got $2 from Uncle John as my portion of the estate of great grandpa, and signed by Joe Blow and the date. That little chit of paper is in these bundles. If you can find those bundle packets of these receipts, plan to take a lot of pictures and examine them carefully, because there are a lot of stories you can find in just by interpreting what those receipts say. Just the name and the amount has been recorded into the returns book, but if Joe Blow lived in Jackson, Mississippi, and great grandpa was in Franklin County, Georgia, and it's filed in Franklin County, Georgia, how would you have known that Joe Blow was kin to great grandpa in Franklin County without that one little receipt? So watch for clues. Unfortunately, you saw that mess in the picture. A lot of modern office holders who are diligent housekeepers may have thrown away all of those little giblets of paper, feeling that they had all been recorded and they didn't need them anymore. And to me, that is a tragedy. So I hope whenever you go to a courthouse, you can find the packets of your ancestors' estate returns still intact. I took my husband to his hometown in Kentucky about 15 years ago and talked him into going to the courthouse with me, and we went into the records room, and I found his 3 great-grandfathers' estate packet still tied up in a little tiny red piece of thread. Obadiah Mays. And it had a bunch of little chits in it. We took pictures of all of them. But it just boggled his mind to see something from the 1840s still tied with the piece of thread that it had been tied up with when they closed that packet. That sends shivers down your spine. Once all the advertising's done, all the reports have been made, and it's time for the final distribution of whatever's left in the estate. The law has different ways that a widow could get 1/3 of the value of the estate herself, equally with her children. This is important to look for, because if she chooses to take her dower right, she may have inherited something of value from her family that her husband on their marriage took possession of. So if she takes her dower right, her dowry, if she inherited land from her father and her husband took ownership when they married, which was the normal way of doing things back then, she may want to get 1/3 of the final value of the estate for herself, for the value of the property that she brought into the marriage. If the deceased had been married before, older children may have been set up in housekeeping when they married by the father. And in the will, if there is a will, only receive $1. If you see an entry like that, go look at the deed records to see if the father gave this child land or slaves or something like that when they married, and thus they would have received their share of his estate long before the other children. And keep in mind that the husband of a daughter until the Civil War unless the father made arrangements for somebody else to manage it for her. It became his, not hers. And sometimes you'll find that if she died without issue or children, the administrator or executor would not give her share to the husband, especially if he'd remarried again and had more children. And that her share would be divided among all the rest of the children. That's why you want to work out who gets what and why. With the final distribution, when the youngest child turns 21 or this is the way an administrator or an executor wraps up the estate of the deceased. And when it's successfully done, he no longer has responsibility for it. And as I said before in the last slide, a husband wife, you'll see that in both deed records and estate records. And go look for marriage records to confirm it. The distribution of the remaining estate is made to the surviving heirs. That's the ones that are still alive when everything is finally down to the last distribution. Look in the newspapers to see if they may have moved away, and see if an ad is placed in the newspapers and states that to that effect, that Joe Blow no longer lives in this county, and that at the last knowledge he was in Jackson, Mississippi. And so they will put an ad in the Athens paper to that effect, and an ad in the Jackson, Mississippi newspaper to that effect. Tells you where Joe Blow went. When you calculate the amount of the distribution of each heir, it also gives you the level of the relationship. Child that can be part of it. Your annual returns could span 30, 40 years. And you have to go through each book for that period to find the returns and make sure you get copies of all of it, so you've got a complete record. So, I'm running over, aren't I? Sorry. That Isaac David's will, here are the heir. He had 10 children by his shares of his estate to his wife's children by her previous husband. That's why that will was such a gold mine. Mom used it years ago. And here's how the distributions worked out. The 10 children had $617. The stepchildren got $525. The grandchildren got $24.71 each. And the step grandchildren got $32.50. I don't know why they got more than the actual blood grandchildren, but that's the way it was. So, and this is just the record showing the final heirs of his estate. Stacy says that we typically stop at 3:30. But I've got the clerk of court and the several other things to go through. And are we going to do a bonus video then, Stacy?
That's what I was thinking, Eve, because this is so valuable, and obviously you have so much to give us. So I think.
Sorry.
Oh, no, it's wonderful. But I was thinking you and I could get together and record the rest of it, and then we can put it on the website, and I'll send it out to everybody as a bonus video.
Okay, it's up to you. And I can stop here or.
Do you want to go through to the illegitimate children slide? Because that's a natural stopping place then with the land records.
Well, the letters of dismission means that there's been a successful settlement of the estate. And you want to be sure to find that too. But if the executor moves away, the administrator dies, or the executrix marries again, that's a biggie right there. You need to read the laws. Just dig a little deeper. This came from my great-great-grandfather's thing. There's one thing way back when, in the early 1800s, when a woman became pregnant and was not married, the court would send he would have to come in and post bond that the child would not be a burden on the court for support, or it went to trial for them to prove that he wasn't the father and prove that somebody else was and was responsible for that child. But finding an illegitimate child is not that scandalous as it was back in the 60s when I first heard about it. And you'll see in the census ILL, somebody said that, oh, I had a sickly family. Illegitimate children. But anyway. So the rest of it, I'm sure you've seen the doodle plat. We will take from here on out and we'll do a separate video for you, and Stacy will put it on the video. And I appreciate all of you for being here. And I hope it's helped you. If you've got questions, I'll be glad to answer them. We'll take a few minutes and do that.
I think there might have been some questions. First of all, this was wonderful, Eve, and I actually thought I knew quite a bit about the probate process, but I have a number of notes for myself that are going to be really useful to go back and look at things. I'm just looking back in the chat to make sure we didn't miss. I thought there was a question.
I tried to follow those chats.
There was one I thought maybe we didn't get to, and I'm just scrolling down. I love the thing where Debbie Harrison said that one courthouse was charging 25 cents or 50 cents for taking pictures with your own camera.
Yeah.
And well, they didn't tell her until she had taken about 50 pictures.
Yeah. Well, that's where they've got control. That's why you got to ask.
Yeah. Yeah. Linda Sampson, I'm not sure this one got addressed. She said she was able to find the letters of administration on Ancestry, wrote to the probate court, and was able to get the guardianship request papers. Shouldn't there be more? How do I find out what other documents exist?
Okay, guardianship, there should be guardian. Is not the widow of the deceased. If the guardianship is the widow of the deceased, you might not have all of these records. And I would go look in the widow's years support records if they have digitized them. Ancestry has only just within the past 3 or 4 years started digitizing the microfilm that they made in the 60s that has been at the Georgia archives all these years. And we've read over and read over and read over and read over for years. So, okay, that guardianship is an older child. Look for the bond book and see who posted bond.
And then Cheryl asked, maybe you address this. It was documentation generated if someone disappeared, either abandoned family or another reason.
That's a very good question. You can find that in the newspapers. The wife, if she had children, would frequently come to the court to get support for herself and her children. And if the person disappears for more than 7 years, they would judge him to be dead. And then she would be free to remarry.
CL asked whether manumission papers for enslaved persons would be found in court records.
Yes.
And I know I have found a number.
They were were they in the Superior Court or in the Ordinary's office, a probate court?
Superior Court, I believe.
I would have thought they'd be in the Superior Court office. But you may also find manumission mentioned in the will of a deceased. You know, I want my slaves to be freed, and then go look at the returns and see if these people were actually freed. A lot of times once the daddy's dead, the family said, we're not giving them away. And they were sold, which is the tragedy of it.
And then also you can think about if they were mentioned in the will, why might that have been? Sometimes it was due to loyal service, so to speak, but sometimes there was
could also be
biological,
a biological family connection, and their DNA can help you.
So one more question. Was this the same process for colonial Georgia records, and do those records exist?
Those records do exist in the older counties. That's where you have to know when the county was formed. Colonial period was Mama's favorite period.
And you all might want to look up her name on Amazon if you're Cheryl.
If you're searching colonial records, she's done a number of 13 volumes of it. Governor Wright, who was the very last governor, and he was the governor during the Revolution, she went to Kew in England and spent hours and hours researching stuff. The record books, yes, are in the courthouse, but they have also, most of them have been microfilmed, Linda. And you can, if you use a family history center, the LDS Family History Center, they can order that microfilm for you to use in their center, or you can use it at the archives. The archives also has copies of these.
Good
microfilm.
News. It's a recent change, but in the last year, Family Search has finished digitizing all of their microfilm. And so you don't have to go. In fact, family history centers can no longer order microfilms. Yeah, so it'll say online if it's digitized. Most of them will be available, some will not because of copyright concerns, and then you might have to go to a family history center to use their computer to view it, or a family search affiliated library, which like the Statesboro Library is affiliated.
you, Stacy. So that's an update. I used to use the Family History Center in Athens for years until Ancestry came along. And so that shows you how out of date I am on that.
Well, there's so much has changed so recently. It's really interesting and very useful. But Eve, thank you so much. This has really been wonderful. Like I said, I learned a lot. And I'll get with you about, again, if you're willing to set up a time where we can record the rest of the slides. And when the recording of this is ready, I will send out a note to everybody who registered. And then we'll also send out a note to the same group when we have the recording done of the remainder of the slides, because there's quite a bit of good information there. So thank you everybody for coming. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you again. Think about joining us in November for the DNA lecture. I think it's going to be really good too. So thank you again, everybody, and we'll see you next time, I hope.
Yep. Thank you all.